Now, there was no way I wasn't going to make a comparison video between these two absolute legendary gaming consoles in their purest forms with their potentials completely unlocked. What's going on, guys? For those of you that are new, I'm Gamehead Ness, and today I'm going to be comparing a fully modded Nintendo Switch with a modded PlayStation Vita. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. The X1 that's inside the Nintendo Switch is way more powerful than what the PlayStation Vita is capable of outputting. But make no mistake about it, the PlayStation Vita is no pushover, and despite being more than a decade old, this console can still stand on its own two legs. So while yes, the Nintendo Switch may seem more powerful on paper, this contest is a lot more closely contested than you would think. So let's talk about some of the differences between owning a modded Vita and owning a modded Switch, starting with the PlayStation Vita. For starters, you can overclock the system, giving a massive performance boost for some of the games that the console struggled with. There are some games that came out for the Vita that just do not run well on it, and overclocking the system is a simple and easy way to max out the performance while playing these titles. Next, you get full access to the system's built-in PSP functionality, essentially turning it into a 2-in-1 handheld. While there were some PSP games that you were able to download from the PlayStation Network, having this thing jailbroken takes it to a completely another level. Not only can it play any PSP game, but you have full access to a variety of different customization options, including the ability to utilize the Vita's second analog stick while playing certain games such as shooters. Another awesome feature you gain access to by modding your Vita is retro emulation. This thing can comfortably emulate all of your 8-bit and 16-bit game consoles. It can comfortably run Game Boy Advance and can play most PlayStation 1 games. It also manages to dabble in N64 and Sega Dreamcast. Performance will vary depending on how resource demanding the emulator is and what game you're trying to play. And with the recent rise in all of these handheld emulation devices, it's finally starting to see some stiff competition, but for many years the PlayStation Vita was one of the top choices for retro emulation on the go. And arguably the best reason for running out and getting your Vita jailbroken is the homebrew scene. This thing is capable of running 2 generations of homebrew because it can play anything that came out for a modded PSP as well. And some of these games are just really good. We're talking almost 2 decades worth of content that you have accessible from both the PSP and PS Vita homebrew scenes. So there's just a ton of options here. Not to mention there are these ports of Android and PC titles that keep coming out consistently for the PlayStation Vita, and some of these are just mind-blowing. It never ceases to amaze me the kind of games these communities get running on the PlayStation Vita, but most of these games run beautifully and feel right at home on the Vita. Switching over to the Nintendo Switch, modding it turns it into something completely different. The performance of a modded Switch is more closely related to a decent tablet PC than it is a game console. It's capable of running custom firmware, but its true superpower lies in its ability to run other operating systems. A jailbroken Switch can get a fully working version of Android running on it, as well as a fully working version of Linux. This opens up all kinds of windows of opportunity to make this console do things that it was never intended to do. Now let's start with running custom firmware. You're able to gain access to all the utilities that you would expect, such as overclocking the system, and creating various partitions with the system's memory. While running retro emulation on a custom firmware, this thing is an absolute beast. It can comfortably run up to N64 and Sega Dreamcast, and you can get some really solid 3DS performance as well. Similar to the Vita, there is an awesome homebrew community that might not be as large as the Vita's just yet, but it seems to be growing rather consistently. As a matter of fact, a lot of the same homebrew that exists for the Vita is available for the Switch as well. Now this is where the major separation occurs. While running Android on your jailbroken Nintendo Switch, it turns into a full-fledged Android device. While running Linux, it turns into a full-fledged Linux device. And what comes along with the functionality of those operating systems are the fine-tuned emulators that exist for them. While the custom firmware on the Nintendo Switch might limit you to 3DS emulation, you can easily get up to PlayStation 2, GameCube, and even beyond while running Linux or Android, making this thing completely unmatched when it comes to utility and functionality. Like I said, it's almost like having a handheld PC, more than it is having just a game console. So now let's talk about which one of these jailbroken consoles is better to own. When it comes to emulation, hands down, the Switch has the PlayStation Vita beat. There's no comparison. The Switch can even run most PS1 and PSP games. The Vita being limited to some N64 and some Dreamcast really hurt it in this department. And if you're using Linux or Android, being able to go all the way up to GameCube comfortably is a huge advantage for the Nintendo Switch. There's just no comparison. Now when it comes to homebrew, on paper, the PS Vita absolutely crushes in this category. Having almost 2 decades worth of homebrew, not to mention all of these awesome ports that are available for the Vita, so I will give a slight advantage to the PlayStation Vita, simply because there's just so much more homebrew available for it. Now let's talk about some of the intangibles, because I feel this is where the two really start to separate from each other. For starters, you're just absolutely not going to be playing online with a jailbroken Nintendo Switch. If Nintendo even catches wind of the fact that you have a modded console, you're banned immediately. Now, while theoretically it is possible for the same thing to happen for the Vita, I've been playing games on my modded Vita for years, and that has never happened to me. Another intangible is the fact that it's just so much easier to mod your Vita than it is the Switch. Now, while the version 1 Switch, the Nintendo Switch consoles that came out around launch time, can be modded using an RCM jig, any other version of the console is going to require the installation of a mod chip. You're going to need to open the console up, and your soldering skills need to be on point. Whereas with the Vita, you don't even need to connect the thing to a PC. The entire modding process can be done directly on the handheld while connected to Wi-Fi. The third intangible is the fact that as of the making of this video, we currently have really solid Nintendo Switch emulation, whereas I can't say the same thing about the PlayStation Vita. The Vita emulation is just not there yet. I can get really good Switch performance on my Steam Deck. I can get really good Switch performance on my gaming PC, yet Vita emulation is still in the early stages. There are some games that work pretty good, but others just don't. I mean, improvements to the emulator are being done regularly, and this might not be the case in the future, but as of right now, the best way to enjoy Vita games is on a PlayStation Vita. I can't say the same about the Switch. Some games actually run better on my Steam Deck than they do on the Switch. And for the final intangible, and I feel this is really the one that puts the icing on the cake, yes, a modded Switch is a fantastic, amazing machine. But as I previously stated, its superpower lies in its ability to run Android and Linux. And if I'm being quite honest, if I ever need to use Android, I have a powerful Android device. If I ever need to use Linux, I have a powerful Linux PC. But one thing I don't have is something that runs the PlayStation Vita's operating system as well as the PlayStation Vita. I just feel this factor diminishes the use case for a modded Nintendo Switch. And that is why, as of the making of this video, if I had to choose between a modded PlayStation Vita and a modded Nintendo Switch, I'm still picking the Vita. I thought long and hard before making this decision. And in the future, if there's a way to enjoy my jailbroken Nintendo Switch without the possibility of getting banned, that might change my mind. Or if PlayStation Vita emulation becomes so advanced to the point where I can enjoy almost every game on an Android device or PC, that might sway my opinion a little bit. But as of right now, owning a modded Vita is all benefit with absolutely no sacrifice. And that's exactly why I have to put it over a modded Switch. Now don't get me wrong, if you own a modded Switch, that's the console for you. If you own a modded Vita, that's the console for you. If you own both, even better. But this video was made to answer the question, which one is better to own? And as of this current moment, the PlayStation Vita is the better modded console. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.